Hi everyone! So I uploaded a video a couple of days ago showing you my Prismacolor Premier colour family chart that I put together, where I've grouped all of the Prismacolors of the 150 set into colour families. So that basically means colours that go best together and continue on from each other. So for example, you can see here that you go from a very light yellow right down into a deep orange red, and each colour along the way is designed to blend in perfectly with the next one, and they all have a similar undertone within the families, so it's really useful for finding blends and also knowing which colours have the same sort of tone to them, and keeping that cohesion within the blends that you're doing. So it was a massive success. I knew that everybody would want to get hold of this chart because it's something that I have needed desperately in the years that I've been using Prismacolor, but I've never quite got around to doing it. So of course that chart is for free, as are all the charts on my YouTube channel and website. So I put it to a vote on my community group on Facebook of which brand of pencils you'd like to see converted into a colour family chart next. And I listed all sorts of different pencils: Artisas, Black Widows, Luminance, Holbein. The one that won out with the most overwhelming majority was the Faber Castell Polychromos. So I have spent literally all day from morning till just now at night, and it's, what are we on, 8:45 at night, creating the Polychromos colour family chart. Again, it was lots and lots of swatching. I'll just show you my swatches that I've been doing to try and come up with the different colour families. But I think we've got there. It was easier and harder in certain respects. It was easier because Faber-Castell do tend to label their colours really, really well. So for example, with the blues, so you have light phthalo blue, middle phthalo blue and phthalo blue. So you know that those colours are going to group together really well. So it's easier in that respect with the Polychromos as opposed to the Prismas. But what made it harder was that I am much more familiar with Prismacolors. I can just glance at a Prismacolor and I'll be able to tell you the name of it without looking, because I've used them that many times. I'm so familiar with all the different shades and tones. With the Polychromos, of course, I do know all of the colours quite well, but I've not used them anywhere near as much as I've used the Prismas. So it was difficult in that sense, really having to look at the colour itself and not rely on the name of it all of the time. But I think I've done my best. Well, I've definitely done my best. I don't know whether it's any good or not, but hopefully it will be. I'm going to fill this chart in now on the video, just as I did with the Prismacolor one, and I will link that in the description if you haven't yet seen that video and you want to download that chart as well. And of course, this blank chart is available as a free download. Again, link in the description so you can download it, print it and colour it in yourself. So again, I just really hope it's useful for you, but for now, let's start the chart. So I've fashioned this chart very similarly to how I did the Prismacolor one. As you can see, both the Prismacolor and the Polychromos have a really nice selection of ochre yellows, which are the yellows that are a little bit more muted, a little bit more brown in tone, and not as bright and vibrant as the ones we'll come to next. These types of yellows usually graduate into an orange tone, a tone that's not orange enough to be put in with the oranges because it's too brown, but it's not brown enough to warrant going in with all of the red-brown tones. So it just goes really nicely with these duller yellows. And ochres are beautiful colours. They're very earthy, they're very natural, and I hope you'll agree that they go together really nicely in this family. So this family, just like the Prismacolor counterpart, was really easy to put together because they go one after the other in the original Polychromos order. So I didn't have much of a headache with this at all. But as you can see when you compare the yellows above, these are a lot more bright, vivid colours that are very saturated. And when you think of a yellow and an orange, you think of this kind of colour. So it's a beautiful gradient, and it's one that people use quite a lot for sunsets and flowers and things like that. So here are the reds, and like the oranges, these were together pretty much in succession in the original Polychromos order, so it didn't take a lot of figuring out. The only one that puzzled me a little bit was the Scarlet Red number 118, because it does have a bit of a reddish brown undertone, and it's quite similar, or at least in the same family, to the Pompeian Red, which is later on in the chart. But as you'll see later on when we get to that stage, it just wouldn't have gone with the other colours that I put around the Pompeian Red, so this was the best place to put it. But really I would probably skip from light cadmium red to pale geranium lake and go through the blend that way. This is just, again, just a little bit of a wild card colour. It doesn't look like it probably on camera, but when you swatch them out, you'll see what I mean about it having that kind of burnt look to it. So these are the reddish pinks, or the pinkish reds, however you want to see it. These weren't together in this order. I started with the light flesh and the dark flesh, which are now called beige red and salmon, so I've put both names on there depending on whether you have the new pencils or not. And I've always thought, when looking through Polychromos, that the dark flesh was much more suited to go next to the light flesh than the medium was. It didn't seem like that was the middle colour, it seemed darker than the dark flesh. So I've moved that one out of the way because it has a different undertone. So we have the light flesh, the dark flesh, and then we move into the carmines, the rose, the pink, and the permanent carmine. And then after that, you're moving into your really, really deep, dark pinkish reds that wouldn't go up here. They don't have the same tone. It's truly about finding the darker shade of the colour as you go along. So it might look a little odd to go from a colour like this, which is quite, well, it is salmon colour, into a dark red, but it really does work if you look at the undertones of each. So I've coloured these in as well because I just wanted to point out the Pompeian Red that we spoke about earlier. As you can see, well, I don't know if you can see, I don't know whether the camera will show you, but when you swatch this out, you will notice what I meant about the Pompeian Red and the Scarlet Red having that same kind of burnt, brownish, earthy orange undertone, and they could just as easily go together as these two, but I thought that these three were a perfect family on their own. So the medium flesh / coral, the Pompeian Red and the Indian Red are much more of an orange tone. So these are your pink tones and these are your orangey tones, but you could use quite a few of these different lighter shades in skin tone as well. So we have some lovely medium dark toned pinks here. Pink Madder Lake, light purple pink and fuchsia. Polychromos are known for having darker colours rather than the lighter shades that you would find in the Prismas, and this is an example of such. So you can see these three colours here look pretty much the same. The fuchsia is darker, but the first two are very, very similar, and they all sit on the same tone, so I've put those together, but again, very little difference between them. Then we're moving the pink slowly into a violet, which comes next. But these pinks here might look a little bit odd to you because we've got two very vibrant pinks. We have the light magenta and the middle purple pink, which go beautifully into one another. And then we get a little bit darker and we start going into this kind of territory again. But again, I really tried to look hard at each tone and see the undertone beneath it and see which category it would fit into. And the magenta, burnt carmine and caput mortem seem to be the closest that I can get to creating a gradient in this tone. So here are the red violets. Now the one colour that really annoyed me was the manganese violet because it just didn't seem to want to sit anywhere between colours. As you can see, if we put the crimson next to it, the crimson is a lighter shade of the manganese violet, so they go really nicely together. But you couldn't put it after the crimson because then the crimson couldn't go properly into the light red violet and continue that blend. Neither could the manganese violet go into the violets or the blue violets because it's just not that type of shade. So it's one of those colours that I found really difficult to place, but I put it in front of the crimson, even though it is a darker shade first, just to show you that those two go really nicely together if you wanted to go that way with the blend. So hopefully the camera is picking up that manganese violet just would not go in either one of these families here, and it really does belong over here. It's just an annoying colour. It's still annoying me. So we've got the violets, and I've chosen violet, purple violet and mauve, and then there's the blue violets. There's only 2 blue violets. So you'll notice as we go through the Polychromos chart that some of the families are smaller than the ones I did in the Prismacolor charts, because you just don't get a lot of lights. It's very much a dark palette, these Polychromos, so you do end up with quite a few medium and dark tones that don't seem to have a lighter counterpart. So yeah, so we've got the violets and the blue violets. So these are what I call the standard blues. They don't have any green tone to them, and they don't have any purple tone to them. They work together really, really well, going from cobalt blue down to the dark indigo. And despite what this says about it being greenish, I don't think it is. I think this is what you would call a royal blue palette. I don't think there's any other undertone to them. The indanthrene blue, maybe I'd say there could be a slight bit of purple in there, but it definitely wouldn't fit within the blue violets. These ultramarine blues go beautifully together. They're probably one of the most matching colour palettes in this family chart, and there's not much more you can say about them really. As you can see, they're a little bit more desaturated than the royal blues over here, as I'll call them, but they're still very warm in tone, and yeah, just a really good blend. Another beautiful blend here. These are really warm sea blues, I would call them, like a really nice beach scene that you would be colouring. The phthalo blue could just as easily nip in here between the cobalts, but then we wouldn't have the transition between the middle phthalo and the bluish turquoise. So here we start moving into the aqua shades now, going from blue into green. You can see that these are the bluish aquas, so the cobalt turquoises, and then the cobalt greens are where we really start to move into that greenish tone. So these are the beautiful dual toned greens, and this is where the names might slip you up sometimes, because you can see that we go light phthalo green, and phthalo green actually comes after the emerald, so the emerald sneaks in there. You really just have to look at the actual colour itself, but just like apple green, this emerald, it's not perfect where it is, but it wouldn't go anywhere else, so that's where I've ended up putting it. But yeah, it's another really, really gorgeous blend, and like I said, very bright, vivid, dual toned greens. So if those were standard blues, these are standard greens. These are what you'd imagine a meadow and grass and lush fields to look like. So that's the kind of colours that you would use for those scenes. There is a permanent green olive in there, which could have been put into the next one I'm going to show you, but again, it just didn't go with the other colours in that mix. So yeah, that's the closest I could get to a gradient. Some of these colours right at the end are a little bit duller, I should say, but again, it was very difficult to put them anywhere else. These two colours are in a league of their own. I couldn't find any spot for those, but they do go really, really nicely together, the earth green and the chromium green opaque. So finally, we've got these greens here, and these two will probably be a bit of a surprise to you, the light yellow glaze and the cadmium yellow lemon. These two appear right at the top of the Polychromos chart with all the other yellows, but you will see if you compare them to the yellows, I don't know whether the camera's going to pick it up, that they have such a green tone to them. It would be a crime to put them with those yellows. They very much remind me of the yellow chartreuse and the chartreuse from the Prismacolor set. And as you can see, these are very kind of mossy greens, and they all blend really beautifully into one another. You might struggle between the yellow lemon and the May green, but again, there was just nowhere else I could put them. They all sit on that same undertone. So here we have some very brownish, or also reddish peachy tones. They've got quite a lot in them, these three, the cinnamon, the sanguine and the Venetian red. But if I just show you kind of side by side, might be difficult, but we've got the these three here, which are much more red in tone than these ones. These are a lot browner, and there is a difference. They could probably go nicely together if you wanted to do a combination between them, but just as for the families, that's where they sit, I think. So the burnt ochre and the burnt sienna are just a couple of, a very limited amount of warm browns that are in this set. A lot of them are quite cool browns, as you'll see on the final family down here. And again, they go really, really nicely together, one blending into the next very easily. So as you can see, when we compare them, we have a lot of really cool browns in here. The temperature really has changed from these reddish browns above. And some of them down here are quite interchangeable. The walnut brown, I would say, is the darkest brown you have. The dark sepia could just as easily have gone right next to the black. It's very, very dark, and it's quite difficult to actually find the brown tone in there without, you know, swatching it right next to the black and the Payne's grey. So yeah, the dark sepia could go next to the black if you like. It's up to you. The final page of the chart is just the greys, and they go in order anyway. So you've got your warm greys first because they have that brown undertone that we're carrying on from, and then the cold greys, the Payne's grey, the black, and then the metallic. So I'm not going to bother filling that in, just like last time. We all know what they look like. But once again, I really hope that this helps you. We've got another chart under our belts. It's always good to have another way of putting colours together and trying to make it easier. That's what I'm trying to do. Just try and make it easier all the time for us to grab colours that go together and really make our pages pop and look cohesive. So again, link will be in the description for you to download this for free. I hope that it does help you. Do tag me if you fill in your charts. I absolutely love to see people's printed and finished charts. It just shows me that it was worthwhile, all the hours and headaches that go into this. So yes, also remember I do have the Prismacolor one, and I will be doing further family charts. I'll give myself a little bit of a rest. But there's lots of other pencil brands we could do this with, and I'm only more than happy to do that for you. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you soon on Colour with Claire.